University of Arkansas head women's basketball coach Mike Neighbors and I were having a conversation about a Malcolm Gladwell book, if you want to know what that was about. Mike begins his 8th year as a head coach at Arkansas. He's a huge fan of West Wing. In fact, it says here the biggest that there is. He makes new staff members watch. And once sat on a plane next to the show's creator, Aaron Sorkin, without knowing that until the end of the flight, which probably the end of the flight conversation accelerated. Mike and I have exchanged conversations about books. We particularly are a fan of books written by Annie Duke. I've mentioned during COVID, her book Thinking in Bets was one that actually guided some of our decision making. Mike once tried out for the Arkansas baseball team back in 1990, told by head coach Norm DeBrine during the tryout, this is a quote, this is not the commissioner saying this, quote, "You seem like you're always in the right spot. You know what to do, but you can't seem to pull it off." You ever thought about coaching, which inspired him to become a coach. So, Mike, I don't know if that's true, but that's what they gave me to work with. So, welcome to the podium, Mike Neighbors from the University of Arkansas.
I'm a little worried about what you uncovered and did not use.
Questions?
Yeah, questions.
Let's go straight to questions. If you'll raise your hand, and we'll get a remote mic to you. And remember, when you ask a question, please identify yourself and the media outlet you represent. Let's go ahead and start on the third row on the right.
Hey, Mike. Ethan Westerman, Whole Hog Sports. Just going into the season, I know the league's preseason poll just got dropped and y'all were picked, at the bottom. Just what do you think, I guess, first of all, about preseason polls and then just that kind of perception right now?
Certainly a huge part of what we do in our sport. I'm used to them. I've been a part of 32 of them. I've never one time finished where the poll predicted, or 0 for 32 on that. So we're just going to focus on making sure we don't finish where we're predicted. I do understand them. I appreciate everybody that votes in them, but I don't think anybody that voted in it's been to a practice yet. So I don't put a lot of stock into it, mainly because, again, we've never finished there. Whether we were picked to finish third one year, we finished fifth. We've never finished where we were picked. So I know it's a part of what we do. I have openly campaigned in the past to only release the top 8 in other leagues. We started in the Pac-12. The Big Ten does it. I think it can sometimes hurt the programs that are picked in the bottom because of the perception, and then you have to answer questions to recruits. Not you. We're fine. Me and you can talk all the time. But I have to answer that question to a recruit. In our league, I can tell you this, somebody that's got a double-digit number beside them is going to make the tournament this year. I'll predict that right now. Somebody who in the preseason poll has a double-digit number beside there will be in the NCAA tournament. That's how good the league is. And you just added 2 teams, I think, that have been to every NCAA tournament except for 1 or 2 since I've been born. So I understand why we have them. I don't like being picked at the bottom. Neither do my players. But I tried to explain to our players yesterday when that hit that it's not really about them. It was about what we did at the end of last year and who we lost. So I think we're in a good spot about it. I coach in reality world, so let's talk about it. It is an important part to our game. It gets a buzz going, whether it's positive or negative. So you have to be able to take the good with the bad. That's where we're at right now, and we're solely focused now on making sure we don't finish there.
Raise your hand if you have a question for the coach. Let's go to the front row on the right, and then we'll come to the front row on the left.
Alan Cole, GamecockScoop.com. Just what kind of player and also what kind of person is South Carolina getting with Miriam Dowda?
Great kid, phenomenal learner, still best basketball ahead of her. If you watched last night, you saw some things that obviously make her very special at her size. I think the first shot she made was a three-pointer. Defensive, will learn a lot around Coach Staley and how they coach defense. I think this is a kid you'll see in the WNBA without a doubt, but a phenomenal, phenomenal kid. We'll pull for her every game except for at least one next year.
Next question, front row on the left.
Hey, Coach. AP Stedham, AP
Yep.
Kelly, as we see it.
Good to see
Coach, good to see you, Coach. Coach, we had this discussion about the AAU, but I guess you're kind of drifting away from that now with the NIL and the transfer portal. And then why do you embrace European players or players from other countries on your team?
So two-part question. You're asking about the AAU stuff and all that. We are still recruiting. We in fact have about half and half. But the reason I'm embracing the international was, did anybody else watch the Olympics? They're catching us. Okay, the basketball being played worldwide now is at a much higher level than it was 10, 15 years ago. So the fact that our men's and women's team are not dominating in the Olympic Games anymore is just a little bit of a snapshot of what's at the younger ages there. So we're kind of trying to beat everybody to that. When it comes to the revenue share and the NIL that's coming in, none of us really know what that is. It's still to be determined. So until I know the rules of the game, I'm going to try to find the best players that fit where we live. And with Walmart in our area and all the other great businesses, the international culture is huge. So we've been able to be successful in attracting kids to Fayetteville, which maybe in the past wouldn't have been true.
Raise your hand if you have a question. Let's go to the third row on the end, and then we'll come back to the second row on the right.
Hey, Mike, your players were talking about a piggy bank that y'all have. Will you talk about it, what that is?
Yeah, so it's an investment visual I want them to have. Each of us have one. Thanks to Signature Bank for giving them to us. But they're just a little plastic piggy bank. And we now, anytime I make a deposit into their banks, now I feel like I can take something out of their banks when I need to. When I need to talk to them about going to class or I need to talk to them about anything, I've got something invested in them. It's in their bank. I give them just a little sheet of paper and I fold it up, and sometimes they're all the same. Sometimes they're very personal to that particular player, ways that we have invested in them. I think sometimes you can lose sight of how much investment goes both ways. So until I have invested into them, I'm not going to take any deposits out of them. I was talking to somebody the other night about coaching these days, and the one thing, all the changes we've had, the one thing that stayed really same is I'm going to coach them as hard as I'm going to love them. So that's what that bank is going to show them. I'm going to coach them. I'm going to take some deposits. I have had to take some deposits out already. So I'll tell them, hey, bring your bank up here. And they're like, oh, God, what did I do? But it's just a little bit of a way to make sure they know I've invested in them in the past, so that I feel like I'm able to take a little deposit out when I need to. Not that I have nothing invested in you. And I hope they do it with each other. I know it's just like anything else. I have some kids that are really into it and some other kids that probably don't have a lot going on with it. But if I can help just one kid or one relationship between me and them and each other, then it's going to be time well spent. I'm glad they brought that up, by the way.
Okay, next question, second row in the middle.
Hi, Mike. Kevin Skarbitsky
Yeah.
from the SEC blog. What are some of the advantages, talent aside, from having so many international players on one team? And what are some of the challenges? Language, perhaps, communication?
Well, to the first part of your question, the advantage is you've got people together that are going through similar transitions. I'd always been told, I went and studied, I talked to a bunch of coaches that have got a number of international students on their roster. And they all, across the board, said if you're going to have two, you need to have 4 or 5 or 6. Don't just have 1 or 2, because they will feel very siloed, very isolated. They won't be open to talking and learning. So we had always kind of had in the back of our mind when we decided to make this transition that it would be about half and half, because I don't want to cut out recruiting domestically as well. We still have too many great relationships, and there's still too many good things happening. We just maybe weren't able to get some of the SEC level caliber kids. So let's go get those kids from our foreign countries and then try still to get the American kids, the non-internationals, and let's build a roster of kind of maybe 50-50. And that's about what we have right now. I think the challenges of it are, like you said, we do literally have to slow down. Every word that comes out of my mouth is new, and they might not understand it. It doesn't help that I have a very strong Arkansas dialect. There are American kids that still need me subtitled. I get it. But I think it has made us all better coaches. And that's kind of gone down our hallway. We have to be very much more intentional than we've ever been about the words that we use, when we use them, and our tone. And we have to be willing to slow down. I would tell you, I feel like we probably are a little behind in the playbook area and all of those things, but I think we're way ahead in some of the other things because we have been intentional and very slow in what we're doing.
Hey, raise your hand if you have a question for Coach. Let's go to the third row in the middle.
Hey, Coach. Brad Harvey, College Sportscast. I wanted to ask you, you haven't had too many coaching changes, and you had one this offseason. You brought in Nick Bradford.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you about him and what he's going to bring to
Sure.
your staff.
I think staff stability is very, very important, and we've worked really hard to do it. But you're going to have some from time to time. Nick is somebody I knew his older brother. He and I were the same age, and I followed Nick's career. not only as a player, but then as a coach when he kind of went to the women's side, like I did. Started out, and he started coaching grassroots at a young age, and he coached some high school, and then he jumped in at Wichita State. And that was my sign that he is really committed to this. He's a Fayetteville guy. And since he's been back, we've had more visitors on our floor probably than we've had all along. So I thought it was important not only to bring somebody in, he can still do it a little bit too. Like if I demonstrate a move and a finishing move, my players laugh at me, rightfully so. But when Coach Nick does it, it's like, oh, that's how it's supposed to look like. So not only does he bring, the familiarity with being from Arkansas, but he can still go out and demonstrate. And he's an unbelievable developer of relationships, and he just fit in very seamlessly.
So raise your hand if you have a question for the coach. All right, let's go back to the front row on the left.
Coach, you have 2 new teams in the conference from your region. Maybe some would take that as a negative, but is that a positive because you can attract players from those 2 states to play in the SEC?
I think it's both. I mean, it makes our recruiting pond a little smaller. Used to, I was able to say we're the westernmost SEC school, and you can come here if you're from I can't say that anymore. So, it's a positive and a negative when it comes to that area. But to lift the profile of our league, it's obviously positive. I mean, you've got 2 teams in the preseason top 10, if I'm not wrong. I'm not fact check me on that, but in some polls, they're both in the preseason top 10. Added to a league that already has had the last how many national champions and whatever other tidbit you want to pull out. That's the positive side. The negative side is it makes our job harder. There's no way around it. They are regional. They are about the same distance to Tulsa. Or Oklahoma is about the same distance to Tulsa as I am. I used to have that advantage. I could say, well, we're in the SEC. They're not. Now that's gone. So I've had to reprint some mailouts and done a little bit of extra work when it comes to that. But because of particularly with them, because of the people that are the head coaches there, for me, I just am excited for it. Obviously, my relationship with Coach Schaefer can be traced back to our days with Coach Blair together, and we have way too many stories on each other. We're not going to share them publicly, I promise you. But we go way, way back. And then with Jenny, we've shared some common staff members. We've come up through this about the same time as head coaches. We've been on a lot of committees together, and somebody that I have an unbelievable amount of respect for. So although I know it makes the job harder, it makes me want to get up and get running a little faster in the morning because I know there's 2 more people that have unbelievable success as coaches and at programs that speak for themselves.
Raise your hand if you have other questions for a coach. Let's go back to the second row.
Mike, Vic Schaefer said earlier today that the coaches, the majority of the coaches are adamantly opposed to moving off of the 16-game league schedule. What's your feeling on that?
I agree. Yeah, I think there's a lot of we've talked in the room. I think the 16 allows us to absorb each other within the league. I think a key point to put out as well, and it may not have got as much publicity, the women's committee took away league record as an NCAA tournament criteria. That was something else we pushed for. I've always felt like a 6-10 team in our league is just as good as some other leagues that might not be upside down. But that criteria no longer exists. So you put those 2 pieces together, I think 16 for us works. Another reason I think it works is because the coaches have gone out and filled their non-conference schedules with quality opponents, and that raises everybody up. That gets the last 2 teams in. Like if we get 8 in, that 8th team got in because what the top 7 did. So with hopefully the increase in at-large bids for the P-Force, maybe we're up to 10. That's why I said I think somebody with a double digit is going to get in. I think it's important that we stay there, but equally as important that every coach goes out and takes advantage of that formula and raises those ships up by what they do with their non-conference schedule. So I've been a voice of that. I've done some research on it and shared that with other coaches and within the room. But we, as the coaches, have to go out and execute it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Otherwise, we should probably go to 18 or 20 or whatever else. But as long as we keep doing it and keep multiple teams in the tournament and succeeding in the tournament, I do think it creates for us an opportunity to get more teams in and improve our seeds.
Raise your hand if you have other questions for the coach. Let's go to the third row on the end.
Mike, we heard on the set talk about defensive mentality this year.
Yeah.
Just what is that?
New. It's new for us, isn't it? Yeah, it was kind of an offensive-minded type. That's kind of where we're at, what we've been known for. We've always thought defense was important. Don't get me wrong, but I think this year for us to be able to compete in our non-conference schedule, our defense has to be mid-season form. Again, when we built the schedule, obviously we weren't anticipating some people to leave the program that we did when we built the schedule a year and a half and 2 years ago. So we're opening with Fairfield. And I mean, the number of people that have called me and said, have you lost your damn mind opening with Fairfield with a new team? Well, I didn't have a new team at the time when we scheduled it. So, yeah, a little bit out of the mind. But Fairfield's a team that won 30 games last year, and we're going to come in, be our first game to put the uniforms on. So I think our defense has got to be at the forefront of what we're going to do. I think our offense will come along. But I definitely think if, the defense isn't there to start, then we're not going to be able to build that offensive mentality into the SEC when we need it to be good. So we've kind of flipped it around. Again, I've had to adapt over the years, and this is one sign that we're actually doing some adaptation. We're going to make sure Coach Schaefer's got 15 – it's Todd Schaefer, not Vic Schaefer, but Todd has got between 15 and 20 minutes extra every practice to focus on defense that used to be allotted to shooting or offensive work. So I hope that we see some evidence of that when we get on the court, and I think the way preseason practices have gone, our defense is certainly ahead of our offense.
All right, other questions for Coach? Please raise your hand. Last call. All right, go ahead and take one.
Oh, last call, shot.
Of course, we know Izzy's a scorer. What she did at Arkansas State last year
Yep.
speaks for itself. Who are some others on the team that you think can maybe pick up some scoring?
Well, Carly Keats was on her way to having an unbelievable end of the year last year until she got a concussion and an elbow to the face in friendly fire from a teammate, and she had to play with a mask. And we all didn't like our masks over our face. You can imagine one over your eyes and your nose trying to play basketball. So we're really going to rely on her. Then we brought Kiki Smith in from Hutch Junior College. It won the national championship, National Junior College Player of the Year, shot a very high percentage from the field. So we'll count there. I also think you'll see an even distribution from everybody that does play. Obviously, Izzy's going to have it in her hands a lot. She said it back there. The amount of misinformation she gives to an opponent is staggering. We've got more clips of her crossing up our men's practice team to the floor already in 19 practices than we probably had in our last 6 or 7 years of other players. She is very deceptive. You think you've got her in front of you, the next thing you know, she's by you. And I credit Michaela Daniels for she came after we played them last year and said, Coach, of all the people I've guarded, she's one of the hardest kids I've ever had to guard because of that deception and the misdirection in her basketball IQ. So I'm anxious to see how it translates. She was obviously started at Missouri, so she understands the SEC. And I think she built a lot of confidence with what they gave her at Arkansas State. That staff did a good job of putting the ball in her hands and letting her make plays. So she's earned our full confidence, players, teammates, coaches, all the way down. So now she's earned that confidence, she'll have our support behind her as well. But it'll be spread out, but I would look for the people we mentioned.
Thank you, Coach.
Yep, you got it. Thank you all for covering women's basketball.